Welcome to Allies or Enemies. I'm Jess.
And I am Sean, and today we are talking about Gloomies, and our copy was provided for review, but the thoughts in this video are all our own.
Gloomies is a 2 to 4 player game designed by Filippo Landini with art by Justin Chan. And in Gloomies, you are helping these Gloomies, which are these adorable ghost-like fairy creatures from outer space, to grow and collect flowers. Let's look at how it plays.
Gloomies has two quite different rounds. You start the first round with a player board, a few cards, one or two little helpers, and a board waiting to be filled with flowers. On your turn, you play up to 3 cards to place flowers on matching spaces, and then place your cards under your board and take a bonus token if one is available on the column where you placed your last flower. These can get you more helpers to trade for cards, Stardust, which scores at the end of each round, or order cards, which you're gonna need in the second round. Once you're done, you grab 2 cards, or 1 if it's a joker, and the next player goes. This continues until all rows are filled with flowers up to the white line, at which point you score for Stardust and for columns of cards you played, with double points if you played enough of one type. And then it's on to round 2. In round 2, you start with a deck of all the cards you played or had in your hand at the end of round 1. And all of the contracts that you collected. In round 2, you again play up to 3 cards, but this time you're taking flowers off of the board and placing them either on your order cards to decorate Gloomies or on your board. And this time the tokens provide Stardust or extra flowers. Round 2 ends once flowers have been removed from all rows up to the white line, and then you score once more for Stardust, along with all of your fulfilled orders and extra collected flowers. And then the Gloomies choose their favorite player.
The key thing really is that this game takes place over 2 phases. So it is a light game, but all the decisions you're making in that first phase are going to impact you in the second phase.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing, because it feels kind of like 2 different games. They're like a lot of similarity, obviously. It's all the same components, but it really is neat that that first phase, you're playing those cards to put out flowers, and you're scoring points for like sets of cards that you get. But then in the second phase, you're taking back those flowers, but now you're decorating those other cards, and really most of your points are coming from scoring those cards. And so that is really neat and you're picking up those cards in that first phase to score in that second phase. So there is quite a bit of kind of planning ahead.
Yeah, we didn't realize as much in our first game. And then from then, we're like, oh, you really do have to plan it in the first phase. Because there is enough that you're considering in the first phase where you do want to try and make sure a couple of your sets have enough flowers to score double, but you also want to try and play as many cards as you can, because that will just put down more cards on the table and score you more points. But you also want to try and pick up a bonus from wherever the last flower that you pick up is. And if that spot is empty, you may not want to play that card.
Yeah, and that is an interesting thing too. Where do you put your last flower? So it's kind of a, I can play 2 and get a bonus, or I can play 3 and put down 3 flower cards. And it is also good to get a mix of flower cards, because all of those Gloomies want a mix of cards, or a mix of different color flowers in that second round. So you can't just focus, even though just focusing gets you more points in that first round. But yeah, those bonuses are really neat. And I like the Stardust, because that incremental scoring obviously really adds up, as incremental scoring does, but that's the one thing that scores in both rounds. So if you invest in that in the first round, it can really pay off in the second round, but also we found it's really competitive. We're really racing for those.
Yeah, definitely. As soon as somebody starts getting them, you want to stop them from getting more, or else they're just going to get tons of points. But you also do want to be able to collect those Gloomy cards for the second half, which is another bonus. And the Little Helpers, which is a great name, are also beneficial because they'll get you more cards.
Yeah, and this game, even though we are talking about, there is like a bunch of strategy and stuff, it also is just a very, very light game. It's very easy to pick up. It's very easy to teach to folks. It reminds me, and we'll come back to this again, but it reminds me a lot of how it felt to play Mycelia, which was Ravensburger's big game that was exactly at the same weight level last year. And Mycelia, I think, really did a good job. And I feel like this, even though it's a different designer, feels kind of like a sequel to that game.
Yeah, I feel like it's more like a spiritual successor because it's a completely different mechanics. It plays over 2 phases, but it is just really easy to learn with a little bit more surprising strategy than you might expect seeing it at first, and with just lovely art.
So moving on to components, let's talk about that art, because that's the big thing that Mycelia and Gloomy share, is the artist Justin Chen. And he does a tremendous job in this game. These Gloomies, which are these like space ghost fairies, as you said in the beginning, and I think that's a good description. They're so adorable. They remind me a lot of the guys, I think they're called Lumas, maybe, in Mario Odyssey, that hang out with Rosalina. And I was a big fan of them as well. And they're just super cute.
Yeah, they are really cute. And just the components across the board, I think, are really nice, because I also really like the flowers, because the flowers are nice and chunky, and they are like multiple colors. They each have at least 2 colors. They're different shapes as well. So I don't think you'd have an issue if you have troubles telling colors apart.
Yeah, oh, they're like quadruple coated, because they're different shapes, they're different patterns, they've got 2 different colors on them, and they're these nice chunky wooden flowers, and they sit in this nice little like round thingy that like is not necessary, but it's like a lovely little bowl for them. And then just how you put them out as well, it's got all these punched out circles. It's this double layered board that's in the middle that you're plopping those on top of so they don't move around or anything. It's just really nice across the board. And the cards too, the cards all do a good job. And again, the cards have kind of a version of double coating as well with those with the Gloomy order cards, because they have both on their bodies where you're going to put the flowers, which is lovely.
Yeah.
And then they also have a list of what the flowers are on the side, so you can quickly see, oh, I'm going to need these 4 flowers, which helps in the first round when you're planning what flowers you want to get, which cards you want to have.
Yeah, and it still keeps the art nice and clean, because it's just these spots of colors for where those flowers will go. So it looks really cute.
So on to player count, and this is going to play quite a bit differently at the different player counts. And a big reason for that is the board starts exactly the same no matter how many players you have. So you've got this white line that you're always going to go to in both rounds. So you're going to fill it up to that line, you're going to empty it out to that line in the 2 different rounds. So as 2 players, you're going to do basically twice as much as you're going to do as 4 players. And they do kind of change the rules a little for that, where you need 6 cards in order to double score them in the first round. Whereas in 4 players, you need 4 cards, but you might note that 4 is not half of 6. So it is a little bit harder, I think, at 4 players to actually be able to get double points on those cards.
Yeah, it is interesting, because I do feel like at 4 players, because of that challenge, you're going to be more likely to really focus on 2 colors and try and get that. But as a result, if most people are doing that, then you may find that in the second round, you're only ever able to play like 1 or 2 cards if most of your hand is the same color.
Well, one nice thing that happens in the second round, though, to kind of mitigate that a bit, is that all of those bonuses in the first round flip over and go down to the bottom in the second round. Most of those give you free flowers.
Yeah.
And so if you didn't get those flower cards in the first round, there still is a fairly easy way to get flowers in that second round. And generally, you want to be getting that extra flower every single time. It's really ABGF. Always be getting flowers as much as you can. So if you can get 4 flowers, playing 3 cards and getting a flower in a turn, that's going to be oodles. That can fill up a whole card.
Yeah, I do wonder if at more players that you'll be more likely to only play 1 or 2 cards, just because you might be more limited in what card colors you have. And as a result, you're probably going to be getting more of those bonus tiles emptied out, because when we found at 2 players, we still had a lot of bonus tiles left over on the phase 1 side by the time we got to phase 2.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, and then all of the phase 1 ones you don't move to the bottom. You lose. So those rows or those columns just don't even have bonuses in the second round. And that is interesting too, because it plays a little bit different. So there aren't a lot of built-in points of variation in this game, but that is because this is kind of one of those quick puzzly games. So really the replayability is just in the puzzle itself, because every game's going to be a little bit different, where the flowers are always going to be in the same place to start out, but your cards are always going to be different. Those bonuses are going to be different. And then that second round really feels different because you've built up your deck so different. And I wouldn't quite call this a deck builder, but that definitely is a little part of it. And I think one of the big points of variability that we found so far is those single cards versus those double cards. And we really, at first, were like, let's just get those single cards. Why would we get a double card? It's just one card. And then we've learned that those half and half cards, those double cards, are actually super important and can really change things. Because often in this game, you can find yourself in that second half just being like, oh no, like I can only play one flower, because you're a little bit more beholden to like what is in your hand. That first half feels a little bit more free flowing. So having those cards does make a big difference.
Yeah, definitely. And those double cards will certainly get you out of a hole. And I think it's going to feel different each game too, depending on how quickly the pace is set, because it ends when that everything below that line is empty. But we've had some games where we just kept emptying out other columns and not those columns. And as a result, we ended up with just like tons of cards. But other games where we've kind of rushed the end a little bit and we still have lots of flowers above that line, we found ourselves almost running out of cards in that second half. We've never run out of cards, but it's definitely gotten closer sometimes.
Yeah, it definitely has. And I could see that even more in a 4-player game, because that can get a little bit scary, because you're not going to get another chance once it gets past that line. So, and I could really see people pushing it to like force people past that line just to be like, you know what, you don't get to play another card. Tough. Now you got to deal with that next round. So I do think, so yeah, you're right. The pace is going to change a bit. The cards that you get are going to change a bit. The Gloomies that you get are going to change a bit. But all those things are like fairly small things. But this is kind of one of those things like Splendor or Azul, where you don't really worry about that because it is just such a quick puzzly game.
So that brings us to final thoughts. And this is very much a lightweight game that looks adorable, and I think just has a little bit more strategy than you expect because of it being played across the 2 phases, and what you do in phase 1 will definitely impact what you can do in phase 2.
Yeah, I think this, much like Mycelia, really kind of hits that sweet spot where it's super easy to teach to new players, but gamers, like there's enough in there that gamers are going to find it interesting, at least for a few plays. And it is super, super cute. One thing I will say though is because of that mid-round scoring and that late round scoring, there have been games where you have been so far ahead of me in the middle that second half feels a bit like, oh boy, like how can I possibly catch up here? So it can feel a little bit like that. This is a tiny little complaint, but that can occasionally happen here because you do have that mid-round scoring and then that end-game scoring. That said, there was at least one time when I came at least close to catching up, and if I would have caught up, that would have been like a monumental victory. So there is that side of it too.
Yeah, no, that is a good point, because this is a game I can see people teaching to new players, because it is really easy to teach and really easy to pick up. But I guess it comes with that caveat where more experienced players will likely just have a higher score.
Yeah, and I think that's an awful lot of games too. But the other nice thing too is that because of those 2 rounds, you can almost just kind of teach a bit of it in that first round and then teach the second round when you get to the second round. There's so little teaching because it really is just play out flowers, pick up flowers. It's a pretty simple game, but I do think that this one is probably going to click with quite a few players. And basically, if you like Mycelia, I think give this one a peek. And that is it. Have you played Gloomies? What did you think? And what are some other lightweight games that maybe you've enjoyed recently?
Thank you so much for watching. As usual, please like, subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you next time for another game.